would love to sit here for an hour and listen to me go blah, 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 blah? And how many of us would like to have an exchange and be active and participate fully? Right, you're my kind of audience. So Michelle is going to have a microphone and she'll be running around in a little bit because I'm going to have some questions for you. And I'm inviting you right now to ask questions of me and share your own experience and your own wisdom with us. Everybody good for that? Yes. Fabulous. You might be momming right now. You might be ready to go back and do something different. That thing might be what you did a long time ago in the days BK, before kids, or it might be something completely new to you. And maybe it'd be good to get a sense of the audience. So how many of you are working outside the home, getting paid for something now? Okay, so about half maybe. And how many of you are wanting to go back to work, let's say in the next 6 months or the next year? Yeah, baby. And how many of you are in the place where you're just starting to think about it, maybe, but I'm not quite ready yet? Yeah, some of that too. So we'll lay the groundwork for you, all right? I have had the same experience, although I didn't take time out to raise a family. When you're at that place where you're going, my kids are grown or nearly so, I feel like I need to do something different. Now what? In my case, it was, I had this fabulous career. I loved it, most of it. There were a couple guys that weren't so great. All right, I'm not naming names. I loved it. And then it was over. And I was asking, now what? So I'm going to share with you some of the big mistakes I made when I left WLS. And some of the things that worked really well for me when the last radio station invited me to make myself available for other opportunities. And I'm hoping you'll learn something. And I'm also going to give you some suggestions about how you can do the same thing. So a little bit of a process to go through, and then we'll talk that through together. Okay? Everybody on board? When I left WLS, it was a nightmare. I had this gigantic knot in my stomach for a meeting with the operations director because he wanted to see me before the show. This is never a good sign. And when I got to his office and the HR guy was with him, we know what that means, right? He's like the angel of death. So, I don't actually remember a lot of the conversation. I remember we've decided to go in a different direction. Blah, 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 blah. And, we think you're not that likable. Like a knife in the heart, right? And then there was more blah, 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 blah about the severance and the contract and so forth. But already my head was swimming because I was thinking, what next, right? If I'm not Catherine Johns from WLS, there's a serious question about who I might be. And all I've ever done was radio. So I knew for sure that I had to get another job in radio because I was educated for radio. This is familiar, isn't it? Yeah, you're in the same place now. I was educated for broadcasting. It was all I'd done. All right, when I was 16, I worked as a waitress in the kitchen at Maryhaven. But mostly, as a professional, I'd been in radio. So that was a very limiting viewpoint. I felt like I didn't have any skills that applied outside of radio. In fact, I don't know how many times I used the phrase, no marketable skills. Isn't that interesting? Because there's only so many radio stations around, right? And they've all got people already. They don't need me. And believe me, some of them made that very clear. So I took a narrow view. That was my first mistake. And my second mistake was I tried to do this by myself. You know how it is, how many of us have ever been invited to make ourselves available for another opportunity? Yeah, several. So here's what happens. For a few weeks, your friends call you, they take you out to lunch, they buy you a drink, they make introductions for you, and then they go on with their working lives, and you stay home and tweak your LinkedIn account. Except that was before LinkedIn, but you get the idea, right? Every life goes on, and then there's me. And instead of reaching out to people who could have helped me, and probably would have helped me, I was stuck on, I have to fix this by myself. It took me almost a year, but I did eventually get another job in radio. And I wound up at WJMK with John Landecker. Everybody knows John Landecker, right? So that was a couple of things. It was a radio job, that was great. It was for less pay than I had made before. It was going back to that role of side chick, being the human laugh track, which I thought I had escaped before that. And I had to do the traffic. I mean, can I just say that in the world of showbiz, doing the traffic is like the guy who sweeps up behind the elephants in the circus parade. There's not much status there. And they try to dress it. I know it's necessary, everybody listens to it. I'm just telling you from the other side of the mic, traffic is kind of an entry-level job. It's not where you're supposed to be at the tail end of a 20-year career, right? It should be the opposite way around. So, I was there for 2 years. And then the program director called me at home one day, and what do you suppose he said? We've decided to go in a different direction. And here's what happened. This was a very different experience. So I did smart things this time. It was really clear to me that if this was what radio had to offer me, and it seemed that this was what radio had to offer me, it wasn't enough for me anymore. It just wasn't the right fit, the way it had been years earlier. And I was ill-equipped to make a transition into something else all by myself. Because I didn't know. I didn't even know what I did know, much less what I didn't know, right? There was so much out there that was possible that I wasn't aware of. So I did a couple sessions with a coach, and this was back in the days when this life coach thing was pretty new, and it's not, today there's a coach on every corner, but it wasn't like that then. But I found this woman that I had met at some luncheon. I called her up and said, I think I need some help. And we went through a process that I have come to kind of hone for myself and describe it as chunking up and chunking down. You might want to write that down, and I'll explain more about what I mean. So, chunking up, chunking down. This is about taking the skills you have, the job you did, and looking at it from a fresh perspective. So when I saw myself as radio personality, that was limited. Where do radio personalities work? At a radio station, right? And we've already been through this. There aren't that many radio stations. They don't need staff. They're cutting, not adding. So I needed to have a different lens. Does that make sense? Yeah. And some of you, I'm sure, have had that experience where it's time to look at what you used to do through a different filter. So chunking up means getting bigger and broader. Think about it as the 30,000-foot view or something like that. Looking at the forest instead of the trees. So a question to ask yourself is, it's a subset of what? So for me, from radio personality, I chunked up. Radio personality is a subset of what? What I really am is a performer. And I had been performing in a radio studio, but that's not the only possible place for me. Maybe I could perform on a stage at the Botanic Gardens. Not that I saw that then, I'm just saying. Here I am, right? So that's the point. Looking at it more broadly allowed me to see a world of possibilities that otherwise were missing for me. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's the first thing, chunking up. So I went from radio personality to performer, up another level. Then at the same time, I started chunking down. So chunking down is about taking the skills you have, the tasks you did, the activities that made up a job, and really looking at them, again, through a different filter. So as long as I was stuck in, I do the traffic, I laugh at John's jokes, I feed him straight lines, I feel his muscle and tell him how strong he is. Who wants that? A DJ. But there's only so many of those, right? That doesn't translate well. But if I really took apart what I did as the co-host and the traffic person, I gathered information and distilled it. and delivered it in a way that was pithy and even entertaining. I balanced a lot of input from the traffic center, from the studio, from the phones. I juggled egos, including my own. And I did it all with a smile. I sort of danced with the unexpected. Now, if you think about those things, there's a lot of places where that could apply. Does that make sense? Sure. So if it's do the traffic, nobody wants it. But if it's gather and distill information and deliver it in a way that's funny and pithy and engaging, sky's the limit. Yes, you see, you get it. Perfect. So that was my process of chunk up and chunk down. Where I wound up was being a presentation skills coach. I worked for a small, kind of a boutique consulting firm. And they were smart because they hired me even though I had no background as a trainer. What they were looking for was gather and distill information, deliver it in a pithy way, have some presence. So the kind of attributes that I had were a good fit for them, even though on paper, it didn't make any sense. I had no background in business and I had no background in training, and they were about to hire me to train business people in presentation skills. Interesting. And it worked out famously. So that's worth noting, that sometimes when it looks on paper like it might not be a perfect fit, if you change the filter, it's exactly right. So I wound up in rooms full of professionals, distilling information and delivering it, balancing the input from all the participants, dancing with the unexpected. It was a perfect fit. So I'd like you to take out, anybody have questions, comments, observations before I go on? Okay. So I'd like you to take out those fancy notebooks you got today, if you haven't already, and write down your most recent position. I mean, that could be CFO, it could be mother, it could be administrative assistant, it could be sales rep, whatever it is or was, just write that down and write it big. Because I am, you might have figured this out, I am all about playing full out. If you've been by my table, you might have seen my book. It's called Show Up and Shine, Simple Steps to Boost Your Confidence and Charisma. And it is about playing full out and not hiding your gift. And that's really what I want to talk to you about now is your gift and how you're going to spin it so you can get out there and share it with people. Does everybody have a position written down? Anybody questioning that or confused about that? Well, that's fine, but I think it's helpful to pick one and do this exercise with each one, but not simultaneously. Because it's a little confusing if I start, well, I know how to share a bedpan with somebody because I was a nursing student. That doesn't really have anything to do with, well, maybe it does have to do with being a radio personality. Anyway, you know what I'm saying. Different skill sets. So pick one, and then chunk up. So just take a minute to think about it. If you were thinking more broadly, whatever it is you do or did, what category would that fit in? Or what would be the umbrella for that? Does that make sense? Yeah. And feel free to talk amongst yourselves. If you need to brainstorm with somebody, sometimes it helps to have some input. So just take a minute for that. And then Michelle, are you back there somewhere? Oh, I'm sorry. Lindsay? Meg. Perfect. So Meg is going to be, she's going to be like Oprah and come around with the microphone so you can share your observation. So when you have something that you think is the right umbrella, you've chunked up, tell us what it is. Who's got a... Meg, can you come down here?
Okay, so the position is called...
Wait.
Yes,
Tell us your name.
Oh, I'm Sarah.
Sarah, fabulous. The position is or was?
A stitcher, a sewer.
A stitcher. Ooh, what did you stitch?
Currently, I'm a stitcher. I make large-scale trade show installation signage.
Okay.
But I chunked this up to a maker or a creative/technical problem solver.
I love that. I love that. Because when I think about stitcher or sewer, I think you must have a lot of visual ability, right? Like I have none of that. So you might look at things and see what fits together, what's attractive, what draws the eye. So that would be a strength for you. And you're right, putting things together in a creative way.
Well, and the ability to solve the problem of making something that has to fit on something else in a limited amount of time.
Perfect. I love it. All right, who else has an umbrella for us? Oh, please, now you can't be this shy. You might have to just shout out. I don't think Meg can get to
My
you.
voice is loud enough. I've been a mother,
Yes,
and so my first thing was manager,
manager,
social director.
social director. Perfect.
I could go on with those.
You could go on, but yes. You know, I heard some of you talking with Jan earlier, when Jan Leahy was talking about resumes, and I heard some conversation about, you know, how do I count for the gap in my resume and so forth. I think mothers have so much in the way of executive ability that you sell yourself short if you don't capitalize on that. Yeah. So being able to manage a family, a calendar, a budget, those are huge things. Who else has one? Yes, and tell us your name.
My name's Pam, and I
Hi,
was
Pam.
just, my name's Pam, and
Oh, wait. Meg, here's the first rule of doing this. Never hand over the microphone.
My name's Pam, and I left the workforce because I was managing a special needs child situation.
Okay, perfect.
So I put that as special needs child advocate, so I put wheel maker, team organizer, manager.
Yes.
So I had to manage a lot of different.
Yes. Plus, that special needs child advocate thing, that's valuable.
How?
I'm not sure yet, but I know there are many people who need it,
I know,
right?
that's what I want.
And there are parents who don't know how to do it for their kids, who could use some input from somebody who's been there. I see a business developing. Really, I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. Okay, what else? Anybody got another one? Yes,
I'm a bookkeeper,
okay,
so I would say that I organize, input, and process financial information.
perfect. Which you could do as a bookkeeper some more, or maybe there are other roles. Could you be a CFO?
Possibly.
Oh, listen to that. You need to show up and shine, girlfriend. You could be a CFO. All right. So now, I'm going to ask you to chunk down. And this might be a little more challenging. So think back to what I was saying about do the traffic or distill and gather information, right? So how can you spin the pieces of this job? Yeah, research, all right. So does that make sense to everybody? Think about the components of the position that you have held or that you do hold, and how could they be framed so that they could be useful in so many different kinds of fields. And just do a couple. I'm going to ask you to take this home and think about it some more, because this is not a 5-minute task, as you're probably figuring out already, right? But even if you can get a couple down, it'll give us some fodder for conversation, and then you can go from there. You look like a woman who has small chunks.
I
See.
way too many is the problem.
When you look up and make eye contact with the speaker, you know what's going to happen. Oh, you couldn't chuck up. Well, okay, tell me the position.
Well, I have so many.
Okay,
She said
pick
to
one.
me
Just pick
earlier-
one.
She said to me earlier, she is the ADD of resumes. And I
Ah.
thought that was so funny.
Yes,
So true.
so there's a lot of ways we can go with that, and we should probably talk later. But for now, pick one of
My
these.
previous position was a life enrichment coordinator.
A what? Life?
Enrichment coordinator.
And for whom did you coordinate life enrichment?
An assisted living facility.
Okay, gotcha.
And it was primarily Alzheimer's dementia.
And is that something you want to go back to, or you don't?
It really was actually out of my field.
Okay, so it was kind of a temporary detour. Nice thing about wandering off the path is you can always wander back
It
onto
actually,
it.
and they all kind of connect as the
Yeah,
process.
yeah. But that's not a problem, that's a good thing, right, that they all kind of connect. So,
ADD resonates.
as a life, yeah, and see, I'm not, is Jan Leahy in this room? Okay. I'm not so hung up on the resume. I know, you spent time this morning learning how important it is, and of course, if you're job seeking, you must have one. And I will tell you that the last umpteen times I got a job, a resume had nothing to do with it, I didn't even have a resume, right? So it's really about how you show up. So you have the ADD of resumes, but if you had to narrow down a focus of a thing that you've done, life enrichment coordinator, what is that about?
Basically, activities and programming.
Activities and programming, okay, that's not a bad start, because there are a lot of places that you could work in programming, right? Facilities, organizations, universities. Programming is broad enough that that gives us a lot of areas underneath it to look at, where the same set of skills that served you well at an Alzheimer's facility would serve you well again. All right, who's got small chunks now? Yes.
So I was a post-production producer.
Wait, you need a mic. Or you need to speak up.
I was a post-production producer, so I chunked down to handling budgets, timelines, talent, managing deliverables, bi-coastal project management.
So that's all stuff that could be used in a lot of different businesses, isn't it? Handling talent, how did you do that?
I just handled their time and their egos and what they did. Basically, I told them what to do
Yeah.
in a way that they could absorb it.
Yes. So you babysat for big egos.
Like a director and a producer, and it's like the north wind and the south wind, and getting them to work together.
Then it's the storm
to meet
front.
my agenda, which is the time and money.
Yeah. So do you see how useful that is, to be able to do that?
What would you call that?
I don't know what you'd call it. I don't think you need a label necessarily. I
It's
think
kind of like project management.
it sounds like project management.
Oh, I like that.
The important thing is that you've got a set of skills that now you start looking for places where those skills are useful. My whole goal here is for us to think more and more broadly about our possibilities, because my experience has been that we get very narrow. And I heard some of that when I was listening to y'all earlier about how do I account for the gap in my resume, and what if I don't have this skills. Somebody, I think it was you, Sarah, asked me, how do I move on if I don't get an advanced degree?
Yeah.
Yeah, like we're thinking about all the obstacles, and I'm asking you to think about the possibilities, just for now. And I'm not disputing that there are obstacles for all of us. I heard somebody bring up age earlier. Does anybody here feel their age is an obstacle besides me? Yeah. It gets harder as you get older, doesn't it? There are stereotypes about older people. And one day I'm going to do a whole workshop just about that, just how people over 50, or maybe even over 45, can frame themselves to get hired, because it gets harder. Do you have some small chunks?
I do. I was a regional,
Wait, your name?
sorry. I'm Diana.
Yeah, you're going to have to give it to us. Your arm is only so long, isn't it?
I'm Diane Egan, and in my last role, I was the Regional Director of Human Resources for a large organization. I was brought in to redesign the business and downsize drastically. So I
So you were the hatchet person, is that what you're saying?
I was the person that you didn't like.
Yeah, that's right, that angel of death. I'm glad to have you here, Diane.
You can probably understand, I don't want to go back into that type of role again.
Yeah.
In that role, I gathered and analyzed information on the business performance. I strategized and developed plans, designed programs to grow the business. I developed plans to implement change and persuaded management to entertain those changes, communicated to the staff on the need for change, developed a lot of marketing materials or communication materials that managers could utilize, to communicate to their staffs on the changes, and then monitor the execution of those plans.
That's a lot. Is that a lot?
Yeah.
Do you want to hire Diane right now? Don't we? So you can do a lot of cool stuff, and I'm gonna guess that one thing that you didn't say, did you actually do the dismissal?
No.
You just figured out the people in the background and the money?
The script on what they needed to say.
Oh, you gave them the script. Interesting. Well, because what I was gonna get at is, there's a certain amount of sensitivity that's required for that, right? And that wasn't something you mentioned, but I would guess that that is one of your qualities also, right? The kind of sensitivity about how people are reacting to things and how to express them or frame them in a way that isn't brutalizing. Yes, I remember the George Clooney movie, and I always wondered, you know, if I had to get fired, why wasn't it by a guy who looked like that? I just lost out. Does everybody get the chunks thing? Do you have questions, and does anybody else have one that they'd like to share with us? Because I find this endlessly fascinating, what people do. Yes,
Just ask for Diane.
ask loud.
Oh, I just want to ask for Diane, where she had this job where she was kind of behind the scenes with downsizing. Couldn't she use those same skills to build up a company and to see where each individual could best be placed?
For a company that's growing?
Yeah, well, actually, we restructured the business, and it was the best performing business unit within the company the next year.
Yeah, so you're brilliant. Are you looking for a gig? What?
I want to load for, I want to flip hamburgers or pull wheat.
I'm glad you brought that up. So there's a couple of things I want to say, and Michelle, give me a time cue. Where are we?
Doing good. You got 3 minutes till the
Oh, all
first
right.
one.
Perfect. So there's a few more things I want to add. And one is about how we think of our skills. So this whole business of thinking narrowly, smaller, more, to use a business buzzword, getting granular with it, right, when we chunk down. I want you to think, as you go home and think this through some more, I want you to think about what you have done in your current or former position from the standpoint of the people you've served. So let me say a little bit about what that means. I talked about gathering and distilling information and delivering it and being funny and that kind of stuff. And all of that is useful. If I flip it and start thinking about the people I served, what did I provide them? Right? What did they get out of this?
Are you talking about the people, the ultimate, the radio audience, or are you talking about the people you work for?
I was talking about the radio audience. In my case, the radio audience. In some people's case, it's the customers or the students, you know, depending on your role. But if I think, what did people get from me? It was information and entertainment, right? Or fun. So that helps me frame, what are you getting from me? Right? Information and even some entertainment, right? Do we agree that this is fun so far?
Yeah.
Thank you. So sometimes when we look at it from our own perspective, we can kind of get lost in the weeds of, I've got too many things and too many job descriptions and too many labels. If you boil it down to what do they get from you, that helps. You had a question? Oh, you just made the mistake of moving and immediately caught my attention. Could you come up with a question just on the spot?
Let's again, just like you, information, entertainment, and fun.
Okay. So can you see then how many places there are that need information, entertainment, and a little bit of fun, right? There are hundreds of places where you can put that into practice. Anybody else have a thought as we do that? Like if you start flipping it around in your mind, so what do people get from me? What do people get from you? I'm sorry, I don't know your name, but I'm looking at you right now. Yes, you.
I would probably say I'm a good marketer.
Okay, so what do you market?
Well, I was just thinking about different jobs that I had in public relations, corporate communications. So the common denominator would be just, marketing.
So I would say even if we're looking for the umbrella, it's really persuasion, right? You're persuasive.
Okay.
And that could take in PR, marketing, advertising, all kinds of communication. Because is there ever a time when we're not trying to persuade anybody? Rarely, right? So persuasion, what do people get from you? Your market, your bosses, your customers, your clients? What does somebody get from you?
Well, right now I'm a stay-at-home mom, so.
So what do your kids get from you? Everything. Cheryl.
I think I've been a mentor and an advisor, and that fits into my work with kids with learning differences and disabilities.
So you're a mentor and advisor, maybe everybody didn't hear, works with kids with learning differences and whatever.
Disabilities.
Oh, I see, I wasn't sure I was allowed to say that. No, I'm not kidding, sometimes.
People with disabilities, that's politically correct.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the reassurance, you've mentored me. See how nice she did that? Yes.
I too am in marketing umbrella. Yeah, our advertising, manufacturing,
Yep.
operations, I've done the gamut. And my sort of enthusiastic manifesto throughout my career, and I was told this 20-some years ago, and it's worked for the people that employed me, hired me, and also my clients.
Okay.
Or closing an account. I passionately do 3 things for whomever, and my family. I make their lives easy, I make them look good, and I make them money and save them money.
Can I take you home with me? Yeah. I could use some of that. So that's an excellent way to frame it. So a couple of quick things, because now time is getting a little short. I know that there were people who had questions about teaching. I used to be a teacher, now I want to go back to work, and I don't really want to go back to a classroom. I was at a conference over the weekend with 120 entrepreneurs, and actually quite a few of them used to be teachers. So I asked, what were the skills that you had as a classroom teacher that you now apply in your new business? And the things they mentioned in particular were classroom management. Because if you can manage a group of unruly 7th graders, you can manage anybody. And presentation skills, comfort standing in front of a room of people, and an ability to keep people interested and engaged, even if they weren't fascinated by the subject at hand. And this informing, like you used the word mentoring, Cheryl, it was that. So a lot of these people, perhaps not surprisingly, are coaches of one sort or another, right? So they're still in the business of educating people or helping people figure out their way through something, but they're not standing in front of a classroom anymore. Does that make sense? So as you start thinking more broadly this way, I think you'll see that whatever your position is or was, there's a way to spin it so that it takes you in a new direction. And that's what I really want for all of you, to be able to see the possibilities. One possibility I want to mention in particular is not getting a job. I know it's seductive, the idea of having a regular paycheck and benefits and all of that, and we actually sometimes think it's secure. Or maybe we don't, Kim. Well, because really, there is no job security anymore, is there? I was at this conference of entrepreneurs, and it was fascinating to me. They're all people who are in business for themselves, and they're doing all different kinds of things. And some of the skills that you all have mentioned fit right in. So I would invite you to at least consider starting your own business instead of getting a job. Now, I've learned from my own hard experience that it pays to get some professional help to do that. I don't mean psychological help, although sometimes I do that too. But it pays to have some coaching from an expert in business if you're not an expert in business. I'm not an expert in business, and the first time I went into business with a partner, it was problematic that we lacked business experience. So I think if you're contemplating that, you need to get some support. But having said that, there is such a world of possibility. So the people at this conference I was at in Myrtle Beach were business coaches, parenting coaches. Somebody ran a concierge service where they did all this stuff that other people are too busy to do because they're at work all day. You know, like let the guy in to fix the dryer and stuff like that. Yoga studio owners, wellness coaches, just presentation skills coaches, ta-da. There was a whole range of skills there. And all of those people, nobody woke up one day and said, hey, I think I'll be a business coach, right? All of them went through a process where that became the next logical step. And it grew out of the kind of assessment that we're doing here about the skills you already have. Is there anybody here who's really thought seriously about starting a business on your own? Tell me what your business is going to be. I'm going to ask you, as you think about this for material later, to really examine the skills and knowledge that you have and see if there isn't a place that you could put them into practice and skip the middleman. So instead of working for a company that does a service, are there people who need what you do that you could work with directly? Because that puts you in charge of your own life in a way that having a job just doesn't. To close, I wanted to say one other thing. I'm backtracking to the resumes again. So the information that we're gathering here, that each of you are writing down and that I want you to continue to ponder and kind of noodle about, is really about building a resume, right? A skill set. What I know is, I don't care how good your resume is, when you show up in the room, if you don't make the right kind of impression, the good resume doesn't matter, right? You gotta have a resume, but nobody hires you because of your resume. I see you shaking your head back there. Does that sound familiar? Yeah. So that's where I can help you. Because I coach people about creating the kind of impression that they want to create. Creating the kind of impression in the moment that backs up the resume. Because ultimately you are your brand. It's how you look, how you sound, how people feel when they're around you.